What's going on, you guys? It's Brobson here, and today's video is going to be a long video of me playing through the Combat Academy in-game with all my game sounds on. The first reason I would suggest you go ahead and take part in the Combat Academy in-game is because you can get some great reward XP from it. If you complete all of the combat tutorials in the Academy with a legend rank, meaning the best rank possible, you'll actually get 21 reward books that scale for reward XP with your level, so you can actually get up to 100,000 XP for completing the Combat Academy, which can be used in any various skills such as Prayer, Herblore, any combat skills, Slayer, etc. So it's very, very useful to do. And in addition to that, the Combat Academy is just incredibly thorough and incredibly detailed in explaining the whole combat system that's implemented in RuneScape 3 in full. So even if you think you know everything there is to know about the combat system, you may pick up a tip or trick or two while playing through the Combat Academy in-game, and I would definitely recommend doing so. So without further ado, I'm going to show you me playing through the entire Combat Academy at normal speed with my game sounds on, and hopefully you guys will remember to do so as well next time you log in.
Welcome to the Combat Academy, fellow adventurer. I run short courses on the more active side of adventuring, more specifically combat. I also provide training dummies for practicing combat in a safe environment. The training sessions are short lessons on specific parts of combat. These allow my students to dip in and out of topics as they wish. I think given your experience, you'd be better off helping me run some sessions rather than being sat in the audience. If you would be up for helping me teach, then we can discuss the courses I have on offer. You look like you know your stuff, but I could always use a hand demonstrating things to my students. Greetings, students and guests, and welcome to my Combat Academy. Today, this adventurer is going to help demonstrate the basics of combat to you all. First, we're going to show how best to get into combat. This is how I expect you all to engage an opponent in combat. Now, let's go over the two most basic rules of combat. Rule number 1, do not die. Rule number 2, defeat your opponent. Needless to say, if you do get hit, it's going to hurt. Always be on your guard. You never know what dirty tricks your opponent may be willing to use. See? Never take your foe for granted. A good way to keep one step ahead of your opponent is to be well supplied. Food is a good place to start. Adventurer, grab some food from the table. Now, let's show the class how effective food can be. As you can see, food will help you endure longer battles. Now we will show how all these elements of combat come together. Give us a moment while the adventurer gets some more food from the table. Let me know. For this demonstration, my friend here will slay a lowly skeleton with his bare hands. For this session, we will be demonstrating the different combat disciplines available to you. There are 3 different disciplines: melee, ranged, and magic. Each discipline has a variety of equipment available to it, especially weapons. Weapons will make you a more fearsome opponent. To start with, my adventurer friend will go and get a weapon from the melee equipment stand. Now, let's show the class how a real adventurer uses a weapon. As you will all see, using the best equipment you can is a good way of giving yourself the edge in combat. Melee weaponry is designed for getting up close and personal with your opponent. A melee combatant will use stabbing, slashing, and crushing weapons. Next, we will show you ranged weaponry. Most ranged weapons require ammunition. Without ammunition, you can't hurt anything. Go on, stick some arrows in the dummy. Ranged weaponry allows you to stay at a distance and run circles around your enemy. A ranged combatant can use arrows, bolts, and thrown weapons. Finally, we will show you how to use magic. Magic works differently to melee and ranged. You cast spells to inflict damage. Normally, magic spells require runes to cast, much like ranged ammunition. Some weapons, such as that wand, reduce or remove the need for runes. You can cast magic spells without a wand or staff, but your spells will be dramatically more effective when you do use one. Magic relies greatly on binding your opponent to keep them at a distance. A magic user will cast air, water, earth, and fire spells. Here's a refresher of what we've just learnt. I'm going to call out combat disciplines and the adventurer will switch weapons to demonstrate each one. Let's start by attacking the dummy with melee. Good work. Ranged. Magic. Excellent. Now, let's hope our students have learnt what weaponry is available to them. Like everything in life, combat has a natural cycle. In the previous session, we introduced the 3 combat disciplines. These interact with each other in an important pattern. Here are 3 skeletons, each representing one of 3 combat disciplines. Listen carefully as I explain the relationship each discipline has to the others. Melee attacks are most effective against ranged armor. However, they're ineffective against magic armor. Ranged attacks are most effective against magic armor, but they're ineffective against melee armor. Lastly, magic attacks are most effective against melee armor. However, they are ineffective against ranged armor. That is what is known in the trade as the combat triangle. It may seem like a lot to take in, but just remember, melee has the edge against ranged, range gets the better of magic, and magic is powerful against melee. If you remember these simple rules, you can better prepare yourself for fighting different opponents. We will now demonstrate how quickly an experienced combatant can react to the combat triangle. My friend here will now attack one of the skeletons. Equip yourself, adventurer. Let's start by attacking the melee skeleton. Excellent. Now attack the ranged skeleton. Excellent. Now attack the magic skeleton. Great. This was a prime example of how to best manipulate the combat triangle. Learn it. It will save your life. For this session, we will be identifying and exploiting our opponent's weaknesses. First, you need to understand that different weapons inflict different kinds of damage. There are 3 types of damage you can deal with melee weapons. Weapons such as daggers, spears, and short swords have stabbing points. Long swords, battle axe, and scimitars have slashing blades. Finally, maces, warhammers and mauls have crushing heads. Now let's further inspect a typical melee weapon. The blade or head of the weapon dictates whether it is suited to stabbing, slashing or crushing. Now we shall cover ranged weaponry. The damage you cause will depend on the ammunition you use. Short bows and shield bows use arrows. Pistol crossbows and heavy crossbows use bolts. Thrown weapons are a damage type in themselves. These include knives and javelins. Now, let's look at a typical ranged weapon. Arrows, bolts, and thrown projectiles each cause damage in different ways. Now, let's look at a typical ranged weapon. Arrows, bolts, and thrown projectiles each cause damage in different ways. Finally, the different kinds of spell. Air spells, water spells, earth spells, fire spells. Now, let's examine a magic spell. Your spellbook will tell you which element a spell belongs to: air, water, earth, or fire. At first glance, you may not notice what your opponent is vulnerable to. You will need to inspect your enemy carefully. Let's look at how to do that. When you know what you're looking for, you can read your opponent like a book. In this case, we can identify that our opponent is ill-equipped for defending against melee, with a specific weakness towards slashing weapons. An opponent who has a specific weakness to stabbing, slashing, or crushing weapons will be almost as weak to melee weapons in general. Likewise, having a strong weakness to arrows or bolts or throwing weapons makes your opponent broadly poor against ranged weapons. And of course, a specific weakness to air, water, earth, or fire will also indicate a general weakness to all magic spells. Exploiting the specific weakness can give you an upper hand, but failing that, you should use one of the other damage types in the same combat discipline. In your travels, you should expect to meet formidable opponents that do not show a weakness. Then, any combat discipline will be equally effective. Now, let's demonstrate how to exploit the weakness your enemy shows. Inspect the dummy and attack it appropriately. Excellent. Try another. Excellent. Try another. Great. That'll do. Now, I hope you've all seen the benefits of exploiting your enemy's weaknesses. Okay, before we move on to some more advanced combat, we need to learn an important lesson. Preparation is everything. Sorry about that, but I think I made my point. When we're in combat, it's important to have everything we might need quick to hand. The best way to achieve this is to prepare, so that when we need something, it's at our fingertips. Our fellow adventurer will now prepare for the course. these attacks are okay for taking down weak enemies, but what if we want to deal some serious damage? You can use some special attacks called abilities. These allow us to be a bit more creative while fighting. There are many types of ability. One even makes your normal attacks stronger. Let's just deal with something basic to start with. On your person, you should each have a book detailing the different abilities. You should refer to this to see the abilities you can perform and to select abilities that you may need in upcoming battles. Our fellow adventurer will now perform an ability. Okay, now that we're prepared, we can attack this dummy with an ability. Many abilities require a certain amount of skill in their particular discipline. Others require specific weapons, such as two-handed weapons or dual-wielded weapons. After using an ability, you'll be unable to perform it again for a short while. Because of this, think carefully about the order in which you trigger your abilities. Otherwise, you might later need one that you accidentally use now. Now that we know about abilities, let's have a more practical demonstration. Give my fellow adventurer time to gear up, and when he comes back to me, we'll begin. Are you ready to begin the practical demonstration? Okay, soon our fellow adventurer will be totally surrounded by vicious skeletons. To prove the power of abilities, he will take on all of these skeletons at once and kill them all. Now that we've learned how to use basic abilities, let's deal some real damage. As you fight, you'll build adrenaline. This can be used to perform powerful attacks. Let's see what adrenaline can do. First, we are just going to attack the dummy without using abilities. Using basic combat abilities fills your adrenaline quicker than normal attacks do. So let's build adrenaline by using some basic abilities. Now we've gained a decent amount of adrenaline, we can have some real fun. Once we have 50% adrenaline, we can unleash powerful attacks called threshold abilities. Threshold abilities use up 15% of your maximum adrenaline, but hit much harder than basic abilities. Make sure you've got 50% adrenaline and use a threshold ability on the dummy. Now... Now that we've shown you thresholds, it's time to put out some real pain. If we fully build up our adrenaline, we can unleash devastating attacks called ultimate abilities. Let's show them something impressive. Build up your adrenaline and unleash an ultimate ability on the dummy. Okay, time for a more practical demonstration. Re-gear, grab some food, and then speak to me when you're ready to begin. Are you ready to begin the practical demonstration? It's time to see all three types of abilities used together. Show them what you're made of, adventurer. While the damage output of abilities is great, that's not the only reason to use them. Abilities have different effects. They can allow you to vary the way damage is dealt, they can be used to debilitate your opponent, and some can be used to defend yourself. You can read about the specifics in your ability book, but for now we'll go over some common effects. First up, there are two ways of restricting your opponent: binds and stuns. A bind will stop your opponent from moving. A stun will not only stop your opponent from moving, but it will also prevent them from performing any actions. This includes eating food to heal up. Let's take a look at what a stun can do. As you saw, the adventurer couldn't perform any actions. That is because he was stunned. Abilities such as anticipation and freedom can protect you from this, but time them wisely. I think it's time I took a hit. Perform a stun ability on me. The next effect I'd like to explain is damage over time. These abilities will inflict a set amount of damage split up into multiple hits over a short period. These abilities are great. They allow you to increase the amount of damage that your opponent is receiving in a set amount of time, as you can continue to attack while the damage over time ability is in effect. For example, my next attack will hit this adventurer for the same amount of damage that I would inflict with a spell, but over a period of 6 seconds. Adventurer, could you use a damage over time ability on me, please? Next up, we're going to cover combo attacks. Combo attacks perform multiple attacks within one ability. However, Unlike damage over time, these abilities don't allow you to perform other attacks while damage is being inflicted. If you perform another ability or action, it will interrupt and the combo attack will end early. Also, your opponent can interrupt your combo attack by performing a stun ability on you. You can interrupt an opponent's combo attack in the same way. Here is an example of a combo attack. Okay, adventurer, hit me with a combo attack. Now, we're going to cover multiple target attacks. These attacks hit multiple targets at once. They center on your current target and also hit those adjacent to it. I'm going to leave the demonstration of this one to my fellow adventurer. Use a multiple target ability on these combat dummies. Finally, I'd like to cover abilities that take more of a supporting role. These abilities don't directly deal damage. Instead, they either boost your damage or reduce the damage you take. These can be found in the Constitution and Defense sections of your ability book. There are many of these abilities, but we'll just cover one for now, and you can experiment with the others on our combat dummies. The ability Momentum will use up adrenaline instantly to increase the power of your non-ability attacks until you next perform an ability. Whilst Momentum is active, you don't build adrenaline, but it is a useful ability if you want to go on a more casual killing spree. Now, activate Momentum. Show these students how it's done. Attack the training dummy. Okay, time for the practical demonstration. Gear up, then speak to me to begin. Are you ready to begin the practical demonstration? Attack the skeletons. Remember to show off your ability effects. Welcome to the Combat Academy, fellow adventurer. There you go.